Hi everyone, this is Grace, and today I'm going to be walking you through how I made this easy, simple beginner set. Now I did actually make this for a beginner class, so I had real live beginners in mind. One of the things that I did for this set is that I did a 1 consistency outline and flood for the entire set. I do that always for especially my beginner classes because it's really just easier to apply, and I'm the one making the icing, so I'm doing the hard part. And I would encourage you to do the same for this set. Try out that thick flood. Check out my Consistencies video if you don't know what I'm talking about. Another note is that you'll see I am flooding all the way to the edge here with my cookies, with my icing, but please, if you're a beginner, don't feel that you have to flood all the way to the edge. It's a little precarious, it's a little risky to do that, so leave a couple millimeters on the edge of your cookie. You can always use a scribe to help encourage that icing to the edge. I'm using my scribe here to help the icing settle and finesse that little tip of the ornament. That's because I'm using a bit of a thick flood here, so it needs a little help. Then I'm doing a wet on wet technique here, which I love doing. One of my favorite first techniques I ever learned. Highly recommend for beginners. My white here is a super bright white because I actually used white food coloring in my icing. I prefer to use the Sugar Art Master Elite in white. I'm doing a pull here with a scribe. I would recommend using your smallest scribe because the fatter the scribe tip, the more it's going to mess with the pull of your wet on wet, and you won't be able to get quite as many pulls through, which is totally fine if that's all you have. You can always use something like a toothpick that has a pretty small end to it. Now here I am using somewhere between a soft and a medium peak to do the top of this ornament. You could even do this before the red is totally dry because it is a thicker consistency. So just a side note on that. There is the ornament, and up next we are going to be doing this tree. You've seen me do this technique a lot because I just love it. It's so versatile and it's fast. I love that you can do this all in one step. There are not a lot of royal icing techniques or designs that can be done in one step. Something else you'll see me use right here is I'm just using a kitchen knife. When I do this set, when I do this kind of technique for, not for a beginner class, I will use my offset spatula, but I wanted to show you here that you don't need to have an offset spatula. You can just use the knife from your kitchen drawer. I'm using a medium peak here. I prefer a medium peak for this technique because the dots are going to hold their shape the best. A soft peak, the dots will kind of bleed together a little too much. It's also important here in these pulls that first of all, you're going to increase the amount of pressure on your pull as you're pulling away so that you get that nice curve effect. You also want to pull the icing far enough and also have a big enough dot that the icing is going to cover that entire section of the cookie, so you get the whole cookie covered with icing. If that freaks you out a little bit more, you can always add more rows of dots. That's totally an option. I just wanted to make this as simple as possible with as few lines as possible. Something else, the stuff I'm sprinkling here is the Sugar Art Diamond Dust in white. I'm obsessed with this stuff. I feel like it just brings it up a whole other notch. Make sure you do that while the icing is wet though. That's why I did this in sections, because you're using a thicker consistency. It's going to crust faster. If it crusts, then the diamond dust is not going to adhere. Up next, we've got Santa. This is one of my favorite Santa cutters. There are a lot of Santa cutters out there. Also, one of my tricks is to actually trace out the shape with an edible marker. Yes, friends, this is an edible marker. The way that I do this is the picture of this cutter on the website that it comes from actually has the drawing of the cookie. I project that image onto the cookies and I trace that just for ease because it's a little stressful to freehand this. The white icing that I'm using here is somewhere between a soft and a medium peak, and I did that because of an application I have later where I needed something a little bit on the softer side, but for this I wanted something a little on the thicker side, so I split the difference and it's somewhere between a soft and a medium peak. And you need to apply those sprinkles, the sanding sugar, as soon as possible because that icing is going to start to crust and then the sanding sugar will not adhere to it. Here I am using a thick flood again for the face. You can tell it's a thick flood because it's going to need some assistance to settle. For this brown here, I used Americolor chocolate brown and added a little bit of black to it. The eyes here, now this is the simplest way to do eyes instead of drawing them on, for example, or using icing, but not all black pearls are created equal, my friends. These are the PME black pearls. They are the best on the market. They're not rock hard, and they're not going to bleed into your icing as it dries, which a lot of black pearls do. The red here, when I talk about this color red, because so many people asked me, it is a combination of the Sugar Art Master Elite Red Rose and Burgundy. The Red Rose is a pretty bright red, and I wanted this to be a deeper, richer red, so I added some burgundy to it. I can't tell you how much burgundy, because to be honest, I actually just used some old, well, to be really honest here, the way I made this red was I just combined a bunch of old red icing from my freezer, but I just know that it's the Red Rose, and then I added some burgundy icing to it to get this gorgeous, gorgeous red. Oh, makes me so happy. People ask all the time also, what are the black specks on your cookies? That is vanilla bean paste. My recipe video is posted on YouTube. Check it out. Using that scribe to help all these little bits settle. Also to note, I did this Santa in a very specific order so that you could do everything all in one go on the base layer. When I make these myself, not as a beginner intention, I do the sections on the Santa in a different order so that there's a bit more dimension to each section, but you have to wait for each section to dry in between, which is not ideal for a 2-hour beginner class. You want to be able to do things much more quickly than having to wait. So I'm using this softish, somewhere between a soft and a medium peak again for the mustache and the eyebrows, making sure to do this on the seam between the face and the hat, or the face and the beard, adding a little button nose here with that same thick flood in brown, using my scribe to help it settle, and there is Santa. All right, we've got just one more to go, my friends. This is the Snowflake. I'm going to admit here that while this is my absolute favorite snowflake cutter ever by Sweet Sugar Belle, it is not the easiest to flood. The reason for that is that all of the corners are very soft, or they're rounded, which means that you really shouldn't be touching down at any point as you're flooding this. Like, it's just one continuous line that you're pulling through, which can be pretty hard, especially for beginners. So I actually ended up using a different snowflake cutter for the class that I actually taught, one that had sharp edges, sharp corners, which I think is just easier for beginners to flood. Totally honest here. This is my thick flood. Again, beginners don't flood all the way to the edge. This is a little challenging to do because it's a lot of surface to cover with a thicker flood. So just keep that in mind. You're gonna need to flood as fast as possible. Use that scribe as fast as possible to help it settle. And then don't do like me and let your base completely dry before you do this next stage. I can tell that mine hasn't completely dried because there's a little bit of shine. I can just tell. It's the kind of shine that tells me that while the top has crusted nicely, it's still wet underneath. I'm using this somewhere between a soft and a medium peak again for the piping here, and I'm going to cover this with that same sanding sugar that I used earlier. Sanding sugar is a specific kind of sugar. It's a bit bigger than table sugar, and it has kind of some sparkle to it. I don't really know how the sparkle gets in there, but it does. Always do your sanding sugar over a bowl, my friends, and then you can just do what I'm doing right here. Super easy, no mess, no fuss. You can reuse your sprinkles. I don't waste them. So this is the issue with not using a totally dry base. While the icing on top is not wet, it's like humid, I guess. So the sprinkles lightly adhered to the surface. When that happens, let your piping completely dry. That's what I've done here. You just can't tell. Because if you don't wait until it dries, you're going to be pulling away the sprinkles from the piping. And you're going to be messing with your piping and you're going to be real sad. So just let it completely dry and then use a medium stiff paintbrush to just brush away the sprinkles that you don't want to be on the cookie. Everything is always, not always, but often salvageable. So there we go. That is the Snowflake. And that's the entire set, my friends. I really love this set. It just proves you don't need a lot of colors. You don't need a lot of techniques to make a really beautiful set. Do it with intention. Make sure your colors coordinate and look good together. And have fun. First and foremost, have fun. I hope you enjoyed this set. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you try this yourself. One design, all 4 designs, whatever. That's all I got. Cheers, y'all.